Traducción. ¿Me oyes en cabina? Hola. Está hablando por el español. Me llega perfecto y me oye perfecto. El inglés me tienes a mí. El inglés.
So, good morning, everyone. Dear Anna, Chair of the High Level Group on the Future of Social Protection in the European Union, and distinguished guest. Lovely indeed. Vale, pues yo creo que ya está todo. Muchas gracias. ¿Qué micrófono van a usar? ¿Solapa o esos que tienen en el atril?
buenos días, probando. 1, 2, 3. Probando. Buenos días. Estamos haciendo una prueba de sonido. Ahora ya sí que se escucha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Así ya se escucha correcto. Gracias. Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the headquarters of the Social Security IT Management Service, and also welcome to those who are watching this event online. Let's start this launch event in Spain on the report of the future of social protection and welfare state in the European Union with some welcoming words by the Minister of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration, Mr. José Luis Escrivá.
Good morning, everyone, for those who are here present and also those who are connected remotely. And in particular, dear Anna, the chair of the high-level group on the future of social protection in the EU, a report sponsored by the Employment of the European Commission. Allow me to start by thanking you for your presence here today and by welcoming you to the headquarters. This is the, as it was said, the Spanish Social Security IT Management Center. Let me welcome especially the representatives of the high-level report group, representatives of other European institutions who are joining us today, as well as scholars and researchers, authorities, social entities that collaborate with us in different respects, and the staff of the Ministry for Inclusion, Social Security and Migration. It is always a great pleasure to welcome guests to our offices, and I strongly believe it is a wonderful way of bringing social security closer to social society, to the civil society. My belief is that as an institution, instead of an ivory tower or merely a management office, we should aspire to be a gathering place. Moreover, these headquarters host one of the principal facilities for data management within the social security system, and I will say in Spain as a whole, and that acts as a good metaphor for how we should bring data and evidence into the policy discussion, something we strive to do every day here in the ministry. Today, we are presenting in Spain the high-level report on the future of social protection and of the welfare in the European Union. As someone of you may remember that we were together in Brussels a few months ago, the report was presented in February in Brussels, where I also had the opportunity to discuss its context in a very enriching panel debate. Today, we take the next logical step in this process by bringing this very insightful report into the national debate. Spain, to my knowledge, is the first country after Brussels in which the report is presented. I believe that the contribution made by this report is basically twofold. The first contribution is identifying the key trends that are going to drastically change our societies and labor markets, and discussing subsequently in the report the main challenges faced by European social protection system resulting from these trends. As the report highlights, today's society is living through a historical moment in time in which three major transitions are taking place simultaneously. The first one is a demographic transition occurring, among other reasons, because we are living longer and in better conditions. This greater longevity comes at the same time as a notable fall in the birth rate. The combination of both phenomena is a test for the viability of our welfare system, no doubt about that, and which should guarantee intergenerational equity. The second transition is related to the digitalization and technological change. These changes represent an enormous opportunity to increase the level of prosperity and well-being we enjoy, but they also bring with them the risk of generating imbalances that lead to growing inequalities. Lastly, as the third element, the report identified what we will know that we are facing climate change and a green transition. The report explores the impact of this set of megatrends on welfare and social policies from a life cycle perspective, and it does all this accompanied by a robust body of evidence, which is presented in a highly didactic and straightforward manner. I would like very much to congratulate once again, as I did in Brussels, the team that made that possible for their excellent work. The second major contribution the report makes is that it triggers a discussion, as any good report should do. This is a task that falls to all of us. On the basis of its findings, we should now take the next step and discuss how to address these challenges, how these issues translate into the specific national context, which policies we should be implementing, or how we can improve the effectiveness of these measures. This is exactly what we will be seeking to do exactly today, with the help of some of the authors of the report, representatives of the civil society, prestigious scholars who are all here with us. While I was preparing today's speech, I was reminded of the discussion we had in Brussels during the presentation of the report about the importance of the positive virtuous cycle between growth and social protection. To achieve sustainable growth, inclusion policies and social protection are needed. As employment will become a scarcer resource in the future, the ability to promote inclusion in society and to increase productivity will allow for more growth. Against this backdrop, one key concept emerges: the return on social investment. Human capital represents the assets that each individual develops to improve their own economic productivity. But in aggregate terms, to me, probably together with institutional frameworks, the human capital is a key factor, the key factor for economic development. Certain investments in human capital could generate a multiplier effect with cumulative returns over the life cycle in terms of job quality, gender equality, and a reduction in intergenerational poverty transmission. We learned in the past very much to measure the return on physical capital, but in the assessment of the return on social investment, we can still make substantial progress. Understanding the nature, results, and applicability of both physical and human capital investment is now a priority, in my view, in order to determine how to enable the development of the latter so that they can serve as a lever for achieving their social development objectives. That is to say, improving inclusion and reducing inequality. By way of example, but a very powerful example in my view, imagine for a moment a child completing middle and higher education instead of dropping out prematurely. And think for a moment of the differential life path, both in terms of expected income for the child and the net income for public institutions. The literature shows that within the wide range of social programs that are implemented, there are certain typologies that have very, very high returns, even infinitive returns, when the negative public investment cost derived from higher tax revenues is considered. In a very well-known study by Hendren and Sprung-Kaiser from Harvard University, which analyzed 133 social programs developed in the US, the conclusion reached was that almost 1 in 2 had extremely high returns. Different studies reflect similar conclusions in areas such as education in general, but especially in childhood and youth education, child health, improvements in housing and neighborhoods, etc. Therefore, the cost incurred in programs of this nature cannot be considered as just another social expenditure, but as a priority investment, given that can they generate financial capacity and a higher social return. This leads to another key element in the design of inclusion policies: data and evaluation, which are crucial for any policy, but also very much in social policy. As policymakers, we need to work in partnership with academia and adopt a new approach based on an ex-ante and ex-post evaluation of our actions. Also on these points, nobody would question the importance of the exploitation and analysis of data. We must ensure that public money is used properly, but we also need to understand which measures are more effective and could become best practices to scale up. When it comes to social investment, we need to be very pragmatic. First, we need evidence and data. Second, at the national level, we need an ex-ante evaluation of the returns expected. And third, we need an ex-post spending review about whether the returns have been achieved. Going through this process is not only very important from an evidence-based policy perspective, but also is central to convince key stakeholders that social investment should be given priority in country expenditure programs. We should bring in this respect this issue of the social investment into the ongoing debate of the new European fiscal discipline framework, actually as the report does when referring to the potential inclusion of social expenditure in golden rules. One of the priorities of the Spanish presidency of the EU in the next semester is to open up the debate by incorporating reputable independent experts who can assist us in the analysis and comparison of existing evidence in this regard. This is one of the discussions triggered by the report, as I said, but I am sure that today's session will also be very helpful in addressing the challenges posed by social protection in Europe in the coming months and years, actually. Thank you again, Anna Diamantopoulou, for giving us the opportunity to go through this very insightful report. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. The event will continue with the presentation of the report by Anna Diamantopoulou, Chair of the High-Level Group on the Future of Social Protection in the EU.
Dear Minister, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I have to thank a lot Minister José Luis Escrivá for this invitation. I have been many years in politics as a commissioner, as a minister in my party, and I know very well, as you all know, that there are two kinds of people in each government. The people from the social affairs who need money, and the people from the fiscal affairs, from the financial sector, who say always, we don't have money. I think that it is important what happened in this Spanish government, because finally there is a man from the financial sector who is responsible for social issues. So he has to combine both. And I think it is the best combination. So I think that it is of high and symbolic importance that the first presentation of the report takes place after Brussels, takes place in Spain. It is a country which champions social dialogue, consensus. I remember that we always referring to Toledo Agreement at the European level because it was really an achievement, and I'm really surprised that again, in the middle of the COVID, there was an agreement again on the basis of Toledo. And of course, it is important that the government prioritizes social justice and committed to reforms, and it tries to find consensus between different stakeholders. At the same time, I have to thank the Commission and the Commissioner Nicola Schmit, the people of the Commission who supported us very much, and of course, the members of the high-level group who are distinguished people from all countries of Europe, and they have done their best for 14 months in order to present this report. It is difficult to present a report in 15 or 20 minutes, but what I would like to tell you is just to give an incentive to read this, because it is not only what I'm going to present now. In the report you can find new ideas, best cases, political pilot projects from across the world, because there was a cooperation with international organizations, with agencies and institutions, and of course between all DGs of the Commission. During the past months, we can see that the public debate in Europe and in all member states has been almost dominated by the energy crisis, the third-party interference by weaponization of resources, the quest of sovereignty and strategic autonomy of Europe, the battle against economic coercion. Crisis after crisis for more than 10 years, particularly for the countries of the South. Managing the last one crisis makes us forget the previous one. But we shall not forget the pandemic and the titanic endeavor Europe made so as to support jobs, to support incomes, and not let social and economic life suffer a huge rift. And I can assure you, according to my European experience, that it was an institutional revolution. Nobody could imagine 10 years ago that the European institutions could agree on such a level of social support. And why it is important now? Because it has to be permanent. And we understand how important the European intervention is for all countries, and not only for the South, or not only for the small or countries with weak economy. Now, during the pandemic, and also afterwards, there were two words who really dominate the public discussions. It was resilience, this word came to our discussions, and foresight, the future. We have to predict the future and to work for the future. So these two words were the compass of our group, future and resilience. And when we're talking about resilient societies, we mean that we have to ensure that they will be able to withstand any form of crisis and, in fact, turn crisis into opportunities. And when we talk about a future well-designed welfare state, what we mean now in the 21st century, it is that this welfare state must absorb asymmetric economic shocks, because we know that there will be other crises in the future, provide insurance against new social risks, we have already, because of energy social risks, and ensure people receive high-quality social services through all the stages of their lives. And this is one of the most important differences with the past, that it is not just to support and protect people. We have to invest in people in order to fit in the future challenges. And these are social investment. Minister has already talked about that. This report tries to have a medium long-term perspective up to 2030, although we have some data for 2050. So how we worked? At the first level, we identified the megatrends and the challenges which have an impact in all social protection systems in all countries, not only in Europe, but in the world. And we focused on 4 of them. It is demographic changes. It is changing world of work, digitalization and technological change, climate change, and green transition. So we have worked a lot, and you can find a quantitative and a qualitative analysis of what this impact is. And it is not only problematic impact. We have to take into account that there are many new opportunities. For example, the digitalization can really change the way we work with data, with social data, with financial data. And it is important that in Spain you have already done that. There are many countries here at the European level that there is a division between the social data and the financial data, and it makes extremely difficult to agree on policies. And then, concerning climate change, it is not only the catastrophes we have, and they have a huge impact in the lives of people, but the green transition is so important. We have to change the way that big companies work, our houses, or the way we eat, or we drive our cars. So all these have an impact. We have worked on this impact. And then we worked on the second chapter, which is taking into account these megatrends. What are the policies that we have identified for adapting the welfare state in response to these challenges? And we had difficulties how to present it. I mean, you can imagine how difficult it is to combine the impact of different megatrends in different areas of social protection, because when we're talking about welfare state and social protection, there are so many different policies. And in the end, what we decided is to present it in a life course perspective with the 3 main stages: early and family life, working life, and retirement age and old people. So here you can see that the first one, investments in education, labor market policies, and work-life balance policies. These are for the working life. And then it is activating and lifelong learning. And the last one, concerning poverty, is an horizontal course one. So in this report, you can find policies concerning the different sectors of life and the links between them, because we know very well that when you invest in children, then you can find it in the end of their lives, because they will have a different working life, a different pension. The problem is that when we invest in children, there is a lot of money, and there is a long time to get back the results, to have the results. So it is so important that social society the civil society, the social partners, and the parties understand the need for future work. The next issue was the financial issue. We know that there is a problem in the future, that social contributions and labor taxes may decrease given the shrinking of the working age of population. So, although we need that sustainable welfare policies require sustainable financing, we know that we have more needs and less money. And there is a transformation of budgets from many and different policies to defense and to energy. This is the situation now at the European level. So we worked a lot, and you can find different ideas on tax policies, on tax avoidance, dealing with tax avoidance, taxation concerning the national, multinational companies, digital companies, new kind of taxes, how they interfere in the market, and a new combination between contribution, individual contributions, and tax. We must accept, and it is more than obvious, that we will need more money. So it is not just a reform in the social sector. We need reforms in the budget as well, in the economic sector. And here, as I said in the beginning, there are always the ones at the European level, at government level, who said, we don't have money. And many times there is a fight when we are going to invest on social issues. And there I would like to make two points, and you can find all the data and the documentation in the report. If we need growth, we need social peace. In order to have social peace, we need a welfare state. It is the precondition. On the other side, why, in order to have growth, we need jobs for people, we need qualitative jobs, and we need healthy companies. What does it mean? Employability and productivity. Again, the precondition is the welfare state. So it is the welfare state, the precondition of growth, of social peace, of development in a country. And of course, in aging societies, as the European societies are, it is the social contract between generations which is very important, and it is the welfare state which signs it. Now, let me give some specific data, what goes on at the European level. You can see your own, sorry, there is a problem for the translation if I'm here. Okay. So, here you can see some very important data, and you can think the data in your own country, because there are not very big differences from country to country. Maybe there are some which are very advanced, the Scandinavian countries, there are problems with the newcomers, etc. So, children, 19.5% at risk of poverty in 2021. Can we imagine what it means for our future? 16.5% of 20 to 34 years old were neither in employment nor in education, the famous NEETs. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I think it works. Okay.
Thank you. And the number, and the third one, you can see now the whole cycle. You can go to the changing world of work, and then we go to the age society. 40% of workers are in non-standard forms of work, temporary, part-time, or self-employed. And this limits their access to social protection. And this is the situation today in Europe. We know that things cannot be better if we change the rules of the labor market. They will be worse, because digitalization and new way of globalization changes a lot the labor market. Over 2/3, 18 million of the 27 million self-employed in the EU, worked on their own with no employees in 2021. You know in Spain very well the issue for the self-employed. Just to give you another number, at the European level, 14% are self-employed, and their contribution is 3% of the whole budget. So this is one of the major changes that in many countries have to take place. Workers, 9% of workers were at risk of poverty in the EU in 2021. Concerning energy poverty, we go to the climate sector. Even before the energy crisis, nearly 30.5 million Europeans were unable to afford keeping their home adequately warm in 2021. In our countries, we could say adequately cool, because the summer will be very, very difficult this year. Those with income below the poverty threshold are much more affected, 16.4% than others, 6.9%. And finally, have a look on that. The fiscal revenue of the EU was 6.1 trillion in 2021, which is 41.7%. And from this 41%, 70% are used for the welfare state already. Now, I give you, it is only 10, 11 numbers, taking into account that in the report you can find a lot of data, but I would like just to give an image of what is going on now and that we have to take into account. And here, in the end, we had 21 recommendations. I tried, it is difficult to present it and to read one by one, but I can present it in six groups. So, starting strong. The first two recommendations concern the children. Affordable early childhood education and care, it is the title of the recommendation, but what is important is that now there is a step forward, and there is a need for children under 3 years old to have an access in care and education. Take care, not care. Care and education, it is what the British call educare. And of course, it must be affordable, but it must free for families which have children in need. The other three are for the young generation. There is again a lot of data why these millennials and Generation Z have different problems. We cannot say bigger or smaller than our generations, but different. And there is a problem in transition from the education life to the working life. So there are concrete recommendations referring how they can start a family and what kind of support they need, and what kind of complemented financial support they need, particular young people from lower economic and lower families to have access to quality education and training. Then it is the working life. Again, there are 5 recommendations. I would like to underline the access to social protection for all people in employment, irrespective of their status. Because this 40% we saw before has a huge problem. There are many, many people, there are millions of people in Europe that have a very low level of social protection. And this is one of the issues which have an impact in the future. High quality of work, upskilling, reskilling, inclusion of immigrants, job retention schemes. The 9th one, it is important because now we need job retention schemes for all, as we said, we saw it during the pandemic. And we must have the government must have them in place, because it will not be always in the future easy for the European Union to give so much money. The third one is supporting adequate income and high quality care in old age. Now, take a look. You have a lot of discussions the last year about the pension report. This is an issue which is more or less a first priority issues in the majority of member states. It's only 10, I think, 10 member states who have really taken care of the reforms needed. And now we have to discuss many things. Of course, we need longer careers, but we have to take into account what kind of jobs they are. There's a difference in the construction sector and in the offices. And here, there is a need for flexible working time and adjusted workplaces for longer careers, and there is an analysis on that. So, there are other, please take care of pension credits for caregiving periods. The long-term care is one of the biggest things at the European level because there is an increasing number of people over 80 years old. And the carriers are women about 50 or more, 50 years old, so they leave their jobs. They don't have any kind of support, and in many cases there is informal work by informal workers, usually women from third countries. Now, at the fourth group, you can see and you can read about new approaches concerning housing, concerning energy policies for constructions, new planning and new universal design housing, and it is very important for the future, for the third age. And take into account the 16th one, high quality and inclusive social services, better involving non-profit and social economy organizations. It is so important. On the one place, we all know that social policies is a state issue. But on the other side, the government or the services, the public services, cannot implement social policies in villages, in cities, in neighbors. So there is a need of cooperation with local authorities and with social services. But there is a need of standards, and it is the government who puts the standards in place, and of evaluation. What the minister said, evaluation is one of the most important things. What we pay, what we take back concerning the lives of people. And I'm going to finish with the financing. And here, two things. The first one is, as I told you, you can find many new ideas or existing ideas concerning the taxation and how we can have more money. But considering minimum tax rates on capital at EU level, it is very important. There is, for example, Hungary, who has 9% tax rate on capital or on companies. And take into account, I could say the example of my own country. It is Greece and Bulgaria. They have the same borders. In Greece it is 22, in Bulgaria is 11. So the companies leave the country and go there. And it happens across Europe. So it is very important. Taxation is a national issue, but EU has to play a role there. And of course, the golden rule, we believe it is very important, at least at the first level, in order the member states to borrow in order to have investment in social protection, so social infrastructures. Ladies and gentlemen, social protection is a national issue, but we know very well that in the European history, there is a fact that many things have changed because there was a cooperation between the member states, the method of open cooperation. There were the European funding which had preconditions. There were European projects, and we learned from each other. So we know that things have changed a lot because the social policies have been part not of legislation, not of directives or regulation, but part of the cooperation between the member states. Now, if I wanted to present the report with very few words, and for the future, I would say, employment is in the center of its policies. It means that the workers need social protection and they need incentives to be in the labor market. And there are two priorities in the two ends of the life course. Children first, and take care of the very old people, because it is the only way for the young people to understand what they have to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. We will continue with a dialogue between Milagros Paniagua, Secretary General of Objectives and Inclusion Policies and Social Welfare, and Mónica Martínez Bravo, Professor of Economics at CENFI. Felipe González de León, Minister Advisor, will be the moderator.
It's working now. Okay, sorry about that. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first panel. During the first two interventions, both the Minister and the Chair of the High-Level Group presented us with the main trends that are going to affect our societies and how these are going to pose challenges to the social protection systems in Europe. Now, what this panel is about is trying to translate that into the Spanish context and into more practical terms. And in order to do that, we have two very authoritative voices, which are the Milagros Paniagua, the Secretary General of Objectives, Inclusion Policies and Social Welfare, and Mónica Martínez Bravo, which is a Professor of Economics at CENFI. Now, together, they both combine this theoretical and the practical expertise in order to discuss the findings in great depth. So before I forgot, you should have received, along with your programs, you should have received a card or a piece of paper in which you will be able to pose some questions at the end of the sessions. So without further ado, let's begin, Mila, with you. And the first question I would like to ask is a basic one, but it's even a good one to recap with the previous intervention. What exactly is social investment, and why is it relevant from a policymaking point of view?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Felipe, for your presentation. I want to thank Anna Diamantopoulos for her presentation. And I'm going to answer your questions. Can you hear me well? Yes. I'm going to answer the two questions. You first asked about what social investment is. And social investment is pretty much linked to what the welfare state transformation is. And the Minister first and then Anna have been presenting the megatrends of social protection and the need for financing this social protection. Indeed, you have been presented the three major transitions of this welfare state: the demographic transition, the digitalization and the technological changes, and the climate change and the green transition. So these trends need to be financed and need to be accomplished. So the first thing answering to what the social investment is the idea of social investment linked to the welfare state transformation and how the welfare states should evolve in the future. Now, indeed, social investment is a framework itself to understand and design the welfare state. Now, the social investment perspective focuses on social expenditure in a different way, identifying the social expenditure as an investment more than a cost. Now, why it is relevant from a policy-making point of view? Okay, it's relevant because policies that support human capital and labor market activation can prevent negative outcomes such as school dropouts or long-term unemployment and early labor market exit. And therefore, these policies can represent investment which in the medium and long run generate returns by enhancing welfare and avoiding benefit dependency. The idea of the social investment is having a welfare state outcomes, identifying the combination of equity and efficiency at the same time. So this social investment is neither new nor easy, but as the Minister said, it is absolutely a challenge and one of our main targets for the Spanish presidency.
Okay, fair enough, but that's sort of a broad concept which can potentially be applied to many policies in many areas. So in the face of limited resources, Monica, and this is the question for you, how do we choose or which policies should be implemented? Because obviously not all are equally good or equally effective.
Hear me well? Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the previous exciting presentation. So I agree very much with the notion that social investment is a very desirable concept, right? It seems that we haven't think through public finances in the right way if we are not properly measuring and taking into account all these benefits that social policies are generated in terms of better health and better better lives, better mental health, etc. Right? So there is need to incorporate that in the way we think about public finances, and I think that this is very, very noteworthy of what this ministry and the rest of the European Commission are trying to promote. But yeah, the challenge is then what policies to push, because it's probably the case that not all policies have the same social return, right? Some of them might have, if you think about childcare programs, right, that the current report emphasizes as one of the recommendations, right? Perhaps if they are of good quality, they may have lots of spillovers in terms of social outcomes, but if they are not properly run or if they are overpacked with low teacher ratios, they might not have such a big. So it's fundamental that we select the best policies, right, that have this greatest return. But how are we going to figure out what are policies, right? And how are we going to measure them, right? So this brings us back to the early intervention of the minister, emphasizing the role of policy, of evidence-based policies and the role of evaluation, right? So in that respect, this ministry has also been innovating how we design policies, and I'll let Milad do in greater detail in the next interventions. But so what is pretty revolutionary of what they have done, and I have the pride of having helped a little bit on that respect, is to push for the evaluation of these itinerarios de inclusión, these pilots, to figure out what interventions we could do to foster social inclusion, right? And it's revolutionary because it's taking as a starting point the thought that, well, perhaps we don't know what works best. So let's go and pilot and test different interventions and see what works better, right? And that I feel that, of course, we cannot do that for every single policy, right? So there is another important debate of what policies and interventions we can design on that basis and which others we need to be more innovative on how we find evidence, right? But that basis of let's test, let's evaluate, it's fundamental, I feel, for the push of this kind of social investment component, because Anna also mentioned, the chair of the high-level group in the previous intervention, that there is this debate between the financing person and the social person in any ministry, right? So in order to convince the finance person, you need to have a solid, rigorous evidence in the table, right? And I think that for that rigorous evidence, there are two important components, right? One is a rigorous methodology, right? One is bringing scientific knowledge, bringing academia, and having a solid report that it's solid with from the point of view of science, which is an international organization, not individual persons that might think that that's rigorous enough. And the second point is the right type of measurement, right? Because when we're talking about social spillovers, right, there could be a lot of things that we would like to measure that might be hard, such as mental health, social inclusion, etc., right? So those components are great and of great importance.
Okay, you gave me there the perfect cue, and I'm coming back to you, Milad, because essentially what Monica was explaining was the importance of evidence-based policy, and she mentioned a few, let's say, theoretical examples, but let's bring it back to practical, and she was mentioning that the ministry has already done this. Can you give us an example of a real-world policy that has been followed, these procedures that have been influenced by this approach?
Okay, the idea of presenting and from the policy making perspective, an evidence-based policy or the use of data when designing the policy is the inclusion policy that started in 2020 with launching the minimum income scheme in June 2020. And this inclusion policy, by the time that we wrote the law in June, had very specific elements for defining what the inclusion policy was going to be. First of all, we wanted to close the last safety net that was not properly closed in Spain, because previous to the minimum income scheme there were 17 regional programs, and with this new minimum income scheme we are getting this redistribution much better from a national perspective. So that was one of the main achievements that the European Commission had been telling us for many years, that we needed to close our last safety net. So first of all, that was the first part. We included in the definition of the minimum income scheme this, it is possible to design this trade-off between equity and efficiency, and we designed the minimum income scheme compatible with work. Not only making it compatible with work, but later on we deployed another law referring to identifying these incentives to work so that someone increased in labor supply could be making more money from the labor market, and we didn't want to have disincentives in the labor market and give some more money by staying or increasing labor supply. So the minimum income scheme itself was designed from the beginning very much focused on data and analysis, and then in the law we already wrote where we identify inclusion as a way of transition. It's not only covering income, but also help people for the transition into the inclusion. And that idea, this was at the time that the law was written, it was at the same time the Next Generation funds were there already, and we identify one way of launching a policy lab, following this evidence base that we were looking for from the beginning. How we did this policy lab, the idea was the following. We wanted to have evidence all over the country, evidence related to all the dimensions of inclusion, about labor, social counseling, health, and different areas of inclusion. But the thing is, we wanted to do that from the very beginning with the help of the academic people knowing the best experiences, and that's why we have been cooperating since the beginning with CENFI and JPAL. We wanted to perform a randomized controlled trial, so you are allowed to measure whether an intervention has an impact. And you do that because you choose a group of people and you split that group of people into two groups, and they need to be comparable from a statistical point of view. One of the group will have a treatment and the other group won't have this treatment, will be the control group, so that at the end of the intervention you can measure the difference of the outcome you want to measure, and if they are comparable, statistical comparable, the differences can be due to the intervention and not to differences in the starting point for the two groups. So the idea has been to have this evidence base since the very beginning. Now, this policy lab has been run with 34 projects and need to finish at the end of this year. Our commitment with the European Commission within the Next Generation Framework is first quarter of 2024. We need to produce results. And the thing is, these results, having been done from the policy making side with the help of the academics, need to provide evidence so that then can be scaled up in the future. And one of the findings which from the policy making side, I find very much interesting is the fact that we are working with the administration, because it's a combination of things. You set up targets, but then to implement policies, it's not easy at all. And we need to combine those setting targets with those helping people, with those in charge of the project. So I think we have a very good opportunity to provide evidence and to make this evidence to be scaled up in the future to any administration and to any NGO.
Okay, then let me take you on that. And Monica, I'm asking you the next question, which is, then how do we do that? How do we scale up the projects into larger programs? What does the best practices internationally tell us, or what the research and the literature tell this on this?
Right, so as Mila just said, policy making is hard, right? And hello? Okay. Thanks. So policy making is very hard, right? But counting with these rigorous pieces of evidence can be a safeguard, right? To make sure that policies are scale up in the right direction and that they are scale up, right? So there are cases internationally, for instance, in which policies have been seen to work in evaluations, and because of that they have persisted, right? So one classical example is Progresa, which was the very first conditional cash transfer that was implemented in Mexico to help populations, and typically at that time in Mexico, whenever there was a public program, that was implemented, but whenever the government changed, any policy of that type was, changed for a different one, right? But Progresa have been evaluated on the basis of a randomized controlled trial and have shown very positive results. So what that meant is that when the government changed, it was so popular and the evidence was so strong that it worked and it helped families that the new government couldn't scrap it. So they just changed the name and continued the policy, right? They call it Oportunidades, right? So that's a good example, right? There are some others, and of course, it's hard to scale up policies. Perhaps they cannot be scaled up in the same design, but they can be an important, these evaluations can be an important input into legal reforms or other types of policies. So another example, for instance, also from Mexico, is an evaluation that was trying to reduce the degree of litigation of workers once they have been dismissed. They tend to litigate to get severance payments, and on average they had to go through judicial processes that would take 4 years, and the courts were completely, collapse, right? As it's happening in many different cases, right? But there was an evaluation which showed that just having a conciliation system, a mediation system before the suit happened seems to increase settlements and reduce the litigation. So that was also rigorously evaluated on the basis of randomized control trial. And when the Mexican government was reforming the legal reform related layover regulation, they mandated this initial counseling. So they mandated that by law, and that was a scale up, right? So of course, you know, it's a tricky process to scale up, but in a sense, if we have these pieces of rigorous evaluation, it's like we're opening doors and windows for policy making in the future to build upon that in many different ways.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really interesting. Now, as we're running out of time, and I want to leave time for the questions, I'm just going to finish up with one question to come back to the very beginning of. To the very beginning of this discussion, which is how do we integrate the social investment into the European arena, into the fiscal framework and into the fiscal rules discussion, Mila?
I don't think it's easy to answer to that. The thing is that, first of all, social investment, as we've been talking in previous presentations and in this conversation, the need is clear, and we need to go for this social investment in a clear way. Now, how to accomplish this issue? First of all, we are determined to do that. We need to set up this framework I was referring to the beginning. So the framework needs many elements. We need to say what social expenditure is going to be taken into account for these golden rules. So someone will have to decide what elements of social expenditure will need to be taken into account. Of course, to say so, you need you need to have evidence so that you help those deciding. They will be deciding based on real information, on evidence. So first of all, what expenditure is going to be taken into account, and then. Of course, you need a framework of information so that all the compliance steps later on can be accomplished as well. And here I would like to point again to all the things that we are developing in the ministry related with information on the itineraries, because believe me, it's very, very difficult to have information on microdata when you are performing a project. So we don't want to have only KPIs saying how many people have participated, how many people have been contributing. We need microdata to assess the impact of policy making. So what we are doing is at least support the idea of the need to go for this social investment and create the framework. And we are running a research, a very quick research that will be available during our presidency, where we want to compare the investment in human capital and physical capital. We won't be able to assess the whole of the investment, but we will be comparing infrastructure and education, which is known to be one of the highest return, as the minister said in his presentation. So we have the ingredients ready.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, I don't know if, thank you both for your time. Now, I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. Otherwise, we are going to move to the next panel. Yep. That's good. Perfect. Okay, thank you everyone for staying with us until the end.
Thank you very much. This launch event will end with a debate. For the debate, we have Laura de Bonfils. She's the head of policy and advocacy at the European Social Platform. And Carlos Sucias, he is the president of the Anti-Poverty Network Spain. Also, we have Leire Salazar. She's the lead scientist at JCR. Also, we'll have Dana Carmen Bachmann, head of the unit of social protection. Anton Hemmerich, he's a professor of political and social sciences at EUY, and also Pasi Moisio, professor of sociology at the Finnish Institute for Wealth and Welfare. And also José Fernández Albertos, the General Director of Social Security, will be the moderator of this debate.
So I guess we should be having the online. Can you hear me well? No. I guess we no. Okay. Can we see them somewhere? Okay. So. Thank you for being here. So in this last panel, we are going to have a selected number of scholars and people from the civil society that have participated and have been intensively involved in social policy, both at the Spanish.
Funciona bien el micrófono.
From the third sector and civil society involved in social protection at the Spanish and the EU level. We have, as Inés was presenting before, we have Laura Bonfil. She participates in the European social platform in different positions, and now she's the policy head of this European social platform at Brussels. We have Carlos Ucías also from the European Network Against Poverty in Spain, has a long activist career in fighting against poverty from the civil society. We are privileged to have two members of the high level group that have released this report that we are launching today. Anton Hemmerich. Can you hear me now better? Yeah, Anton Hemmerich, and who is a professor of science and sociology at the European University. Sorry, at the European University Institute in Florence. We have also, and has a long career participating in the social policy in general, but is a big name in this area of social investment. We have Pasi Moisio, which is a research professor at the Finnish Institute for Health and Well-being, and also at the University of Turku in Finland, and has also been a member of this high-level group. We are privileged to have them both here. And finally, we have Dana Bookman, who is the head of unit at the DG, at the Director General of Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission, and has also a long career in participating in social protection policies from the European Commission. So I would like to start this conversation by posing a question to the panel members on how to make sure that the big, broad agenda that have been presented here in this report in terms of changing the priorities of social policies, addressing the new challenges, this should require major transformations in the way priorities are translated into policy making, and how, my first question would be, what their experience and their research can teach us about how do we make sure that societies support this ambitious policy reform, and how this ambitious policy reform is sustained in the future, given the long-term horizon that we are talking about today. So, anyone who would like to jump here in this first question? Carlos?
Bueno, sí, sí.
Well, of course. Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this panel. And I'm going to say something obvious to start with. First, by saying the truth, by not using euphemisms. Citizens are not as mistrustful of metrics as when they think that people are trying to trick them or deceive them. So be careful with the language that you use, be truthful, be clear, say what you mean and where you want to get to. And research shows that the majority of European citizens promote or believe in investment in social protection, and they're willing to see those investments in social protection happen. But of course, we need to make sure that that is done in the right way. So we don't actually have a problem with public support. We have a problem in how public policies are communicated to the public, which is quite a different thing. And then we need to really increase the visibility of what is happening and has happened. And I think Spain can make a contribution in that sense. We have had two major crises, one after another, and actually a third, which we're living through now. The financial crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, and now the Ukraine war. And we've seen great differences in the way that the crises have been managed and how now in this second crisis, while in the first we saw the suffering that was caused by those austerity policies and how there was a complete asymmetric impact on the European countries as a result of that crisis. But this time, the EU measures and the policies of the member states, Spain, of course, and the different territories of the member states, how the response has been different with very different policies, many aligned with the conclusions of the report we've heard this morning, and what an impact they've had. We saw the results of the Living Conditions survey here in Spain yesterday, and we saw improvements in almost every indicator. And the survey was done at the worst time of inflation peaking and with the highest cost of energy in years. And in spite of that, we've not seen a collapse in living conditions as we would have had if the previous policies had been applied. And so we have to communicate to our citizens what the right policies are and to have their support. And again, not to do politic fiction. That is, when we say we need more investment in social policy, we obviously say that we need more fiscal justice, and that means having a more redistributive fiscal system, and that's for the whole European Union. And so I do think we can achieve a lot of public support, but you need to be clear and you need to be truthful, and you certainly need to explain how policies can be successful when they're properly designed and implemented. Social inclusion policies, we have to state clearly that are also economic development policies. They're not just a burden. And if we don't do that, we would not have the kind of public support we need. And I think the changes that have happened are moving in the right direction. We have a great opportunity to make structural changes in social protection policies in the whole European Union.
Anton, maybe you wanted to say something about how the way in which we make policies may matter for how these policies get sustainability over the long run.
Showed earlier is that in recent years we haven't done a very good job in investing in the next generation. And the thing is that to the extent that you do not invest in the next generation, that means for somebody like me that I will have a low pension because the next generation really finances my pension through their future
Anton, we lost you.
productivity. And that's the life course. We therefore can have a very good discussion about long-term policy with, the general public, with the electorate. So I really think we can have a good conversation, and I think that's very important because, just to give you an example, look at the Macron pension reform. I don't think it's such a bad reform, but the whole debate is only about the age of 62 and 64, and there are many other things in that reform that don't get any coverage. So we should really broaden the repertoire of policy issues when we are discussing reform. Thank you.
Anton. Point of the report. This it forces us to think over how the policies that we make today have impact over the long-term perspective that are put into the table in the report, and how do this match between what we are doing today to solve the daily issues that we confront in our societies is leading us towards something that is going to be more resilient, more sustainable, given the mega trends that the report identifies. That's a very interesting, I think, general reflection from the report. Now, I would like to ask you, some of you have been working and been very involved in how this idea that is very central to the report of the changing nature of work, the idea that the relationships between employees and employers are changing, the rise in the gig economy, the digitalization, automatization, all these processes that are changing the very nature of work, how this debate have been in a way addressed by some policy proposals, such as this universal basic income, the guaranteed job schemes, a new sort of reshuffle of the social protection framework. So moving again, and I think that's again an important element of the report, moving to what the implications of these debates are. Can some of you tell us some of the implications? What have you learned from these debates, and how can they help us move into the direction that the report is pointing us towards? This idea of more resilient social protection systems in the face of these mega challenges? Maybe later.
No, I don't think it's working. No? Hope it's working now. Yeah. Well, thanks for this invitation. I'm very, very glad to be here today with all this very knowledgeable group of people. Well, I'd like to first say that I very much share this approach that social risks is what we need to focus at the moment, and the chair of the high-level group very strongly pointed out to what some of these risks are. And I agree that we should focus on this, but I would also like to highlight that these social risks, even if they're more diverse relative to the past, so more people which in the past weren't that exposed to these risks are now at the moment also exposed, but still these risks are socially stratified. And this means that they're not evenly distributed across, for instance, families or households with different resources. And it's people, not only adults, but also children coming from families or households with fewer resources, those who are more exposed or more prone to be vulnerable to these risks. This is just maybe an introduction to the rationale of some of the things we're doing. So at the DICLAS project in the JRC, the Joint Research Center, which is the policy DG in the European Union dealing with the evidence production to inform the whole policy-making process, we have this project which has a foresight nature, and within that project we do research on several topics, but one of the initiatives that we've been conducting in the last couple of years is a series of workshops called Real Utopias for a Social Europe. So there we bring together experts from all over the world working on some bold, novel, often also controversial initiatives, and we put them to agree and disagree on things, and then we take stock of the consensuses and also of maybe areas where more research is needed. So far we've done 2 workshops, one focused on universal benefits, and that covers both universal basic income, and I'm sure my colleague Pasi will talk probably about this because he's one of the world top-class experts on this issue. So universal basic income, but also universal inheritance. And then in the second workshop, we've been focusing on working time reduction and specifically the 4-day week. So I'll very briefly say that we are mostly interested in the pros and cons of these initiatives, also its potential scalability and the financial sustainability, but also more specifically on the distributional aspects, because we are a project interested in socioeconomic inequalities mostly. So let me just mention very briefly that we've been ourselves conducting some research on the universal inheritance, which, as you know, is a one-off universal grant that is paid at a set age, which is typically 18, to all individuals, irrespective of their parental backgrounds, characteristics, etc. So this is typically funded through either wealth or inheritance taxes. And the main rationale of this proposal is that because wealth is very unequally distributed across social backgrounds, even more so than income, and many young people not coming from very wealthy families do not have any access privately to resources to start an independent life, so to study more or to start a business, acquire their own household, etc. So the universal inheritance is precisely aimed at improving equality of opportunity intergenerationally, so from the parents to the children generation, and also to enhance autonomy in from the parental resources, so to make less dependent what you get in life from what your parents can provide. And in our own simulations, we show for several European countries that under some specific parameters, the introduction of a universal inheritance would actually reduce wealth inequalities, and it could be realistically funded by taxing only the top 1 percentile. The advantage of the universal inheritance, as opposed to maybe the universal basic income, is that universal inheritance is, according to the experts, less divisive ideologically than the UB, because it's focused precisely on intergenerational equality of opportunity and not necessarily equality of results, which tends to be a bit more controversial. So it's a policy that might be more likely to be supported across the board. That's one. And then very briefly on the 4-day week, as you know, this is in the public debate recently, and it's usually regarded by experts as a triple dividend that can have benefits in the economy, in the social, and in the climate spheres by increasing productivity, increasing workers' well-being and health, and also lowering emissions. So these 3 sets of dimensions. So we've also in the team run some simulations on the different scenarios for adopting the 4-day week, and we show that this policy could increase labor participation across all income levels, but more strongly for women and also for low-income individuals. But it also improves social welfare and reduces inequality in welfare, in the social welfare function, which includes both equality and efficiency. So we believe that this initiative, the 4-day week, could also appeal to very diverse ideological audiences, so to speak, and also to link it with the first question that you were posing. So these are the 2 maybe novel policy initiatives that we've been studying recently, and I hope they're of interest to everyone.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Maybe Pasi, you've been working on some of these initiatives in your work. To what extent this issue that Ana Diamantopoulos was presenting as this new novel structure of work, this high percentage of people that are in non-standard forms of unemployment, to what extent these problems that are for which the report proposes solutions can be complementary, targeted towards or partially tackled through these new initiatives.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully my echo is not okay. This is just for me. At the high-level group, we just discussed about the changing world, and especially how the strength or strain on the social contribution finance, social insurance. And this way, the tax-financed social security, which in Nordic countries is called residence-based security, is perhaps one way to solve the problems of the changing world and the fact that a large group of the people are working in the sector. But you asked about the basic income and the minimum income scheme. I'm also working in Finland in a social security committee, and it just proposed the large reform of social insurance benefits, meaning that they should merge together, and that was after a long research and debate of three different alternatives. One of them was basic income, one of them was personal accounts, and the third one was one social insurance benefits. So this way, I'm very familiar with the debate on pros and cons on basic income, and at least came to the conclusion that the basic income is not the right, reform or tool to achieve those goals that are expected or required for future social security. And at the same time, Spain and Finland have also similarities when it comes to minimum incomes. Finland nationalized, centralized its social assistance system in 2018, which created a national guaranteed minimum income system. That it's very echoing this minimum living income reform that we have in Spain. And also I heard about the future social security. Oh,
Special position to investments in policies that have long-term consequences for the life, for the well-being of individuals, given the extra impact, additional impact that they will have also on other aspects of the economy. And actually, Carlos was pointing out this I think his first intervention. So then we had this discussion of to what extent these social investments can be put into the table into changing the macroeconomic framework, governance framework of the EU, to what extent the rules that we set up in this economic framework can give incentives to countries to move expenditures towards these social investments, and what are the tools and the opportunities that governments can can exploit in moving the debate forward in this direction? What do you think are the obstacles, and to what extent are there now opportunities to move the debate towards this use of social investment more clearly as a tool as an element of the macroeconomic governance framework?
To whom was this question for? Because I didn't hear the beginning.
Anton? No one can hear?
Now it's faintly we can hear you.
Now it's better.
Anton, you can hear us?
Yes. So I guess this question was posed to me.
Anton, you can answer this question.
I'll try to do my best. I mean, I think so there are two problems here. One is an issue of constraints, and I think the constraints probably will become political. I mean, I've read an article by the finance minister of Germany this morning in the Financial Times, which basically said we simply have to go back to the growth pact, the way we agreed to that in the 1990s, which, you know, the Great Recession showed that was a huge mistake. So that's a political constraint. So on the side of the opportunities, and I think this is what we underline in the report, is that we have aging societies and we have a knowledge economy. So we will have less people in the workforce to pay for pensions. That is in early, really in early life. So if we are, I mean, you're opening up a can of worms when you say, you know, we need a golden rule on social investment. But I think that, you know, a golden rule on early childhood education and care, I mean, scientifically, it's a no-brainer. But I think it's very important for our politicians to do the homework with the academics and make a very strong case for this. Because if we do not invest in the next generation, then the very sustainability, not just of the welfare state, but also of fiscal consolidation at large, is at risk.
Sorry, Laura, I wanted to ask you, to what extent is this a proposal that can fit in the sort of the third sector priorities? To what extent is this something that feels that can be easily incorporated in the civil society push for reform in the EU in the future?
In place, and this is what people are asking. Like, our members have been, and they are the ones that are the most vulnerable in society, have been asking for strong social protection, strong social investment in childhood education, investment in young people, but as well having access to accessible services. And so this is what is being asked, and we support some of the reform or the request that Spain has been putting forward as well, for example in the economic governance review, or as well to introduce in a social imbalance measure, or what the name will be in the future, to allow social spending and to allow to actually make our society more resilient, because we know, like we've seen with the crisis, that as well we need to respond to the what people are asking, that is actually the having support, having safety nets to respond to this crisis, but as well as the report has been showing, to the changes that we are going towards. And just to say, like we need, like delivering this, like strengthening social protection, but delivering that these different measures that the report has been identified, it will bring like people outside poverty on actually and will support them. And as already said several times by other speakers, these are investments on people rather than cost for the society, because that, like, we can be more resilient. So just to to say, as for example, as a social platform, but together with our members, one of the main policies that we've been asking for is to deliver a minimum income at European level, like to set minimum standards at European level. We've seen, like for example, Spain has been focusing on building an adequate minimum income, but we need a common response. So this is, for example, one of the requests that is being very vocal from civil society. And like, just to conclude for the question that you had before, like how can we make sure that there is actually acceptability on this reform that we need to do? It's including people, so including, like, having a strong civil dialogue, but as well a strong social dialogue when we do these reforms at European level, but and as well at national level. So including civil society and the people that that we represent, that are the most vulnerable of society. Thank you. Anymore?
Running out of time, maybe I will just give you a last opportunity to each of the panelists to identify. So one of the big questions when one reads the report is how all these big elements get translated into the day-to-day activities of policymakers, and how should we prioritize among the many proposals and recommendations that are put in the table. So now it has been said Spain will hold the presidency for the second semester of the year. There has been discussed how the Spanish president wants to make in this area, particularly this social investment initiative, an element of a priority in this presidency. So if you would have to choose one of the big reflections of the report and how should be incorporated into the day-to-day activities of policymakers of Spain, but also across Europe in the short run, which one of those initiatives would you select? Maybe Carlos?
Elegir una. Entonces, una de las primeras cosas que había que hacer es ver cómo se hace. Expertos, expertos universitarios, a técnicos de alto renombre, a altos funcionarios, a ministros, a secretarios de Estado y demás. Cómo se puede hacer en la política agrícola, cómo se puede hacer en la política financiera, cómo se puede hacer en la industria del automóvil. Pero en la política agrícola también se llama a los agricultores. En la política financiera también se llama a los financieros. En la política automóvil también se llama a los propietarios de las grandes empresas automovilísticas. ¿Por qué en las políticas de pobreza no se puede consultar a las personas con experiencia en pobreza?
You do not ask any people with any experience in poverty.
¿Alguien piensa que ellos no saben que las personas con experiencia en pobreza no saben lo que les pasa y no saben lo que quieren? Son 95 millones de ciudadanos que merecen también ser escuchados directamente, aparte de todos los que queramos, que por supuesto estemos de acuerdo. Pero también no son un grupo de personas que dicen cualquier cosa. Son personas que saben lo que quieren. Y decir también que los procesos de participación de los agricultores, de los financieros, por supuesto de los automovilistas y demás, y de las personas con experiencia en pobreza, de todos los ciudadanos de la Unión Europea, eso también es un elemento de consolidación de la democracia. ¿Qué llevaría yo a la presidencia española de la Unión Europea? Aquí estamos haciendo, lo ha dicho antes Mila, que se están haciendo 34 proyectos de itinerarios que son especialmente importantes, porque estamos analizando de cómo se interviene directamente con las personas más vulnerables. Y eso es especialmente importante para ver qué debilidades y qué fortalezas tienen esas intervenciones y de ahí aprender y hacer las cosas mejor. Quiero también hacer referencia a uno que es un poquito distinto, ¿no? Que es el llamado el non-TECAP, es decir, cómo llegamos a los ciudadanos que teniendo derecho a determinados tipos de servicios y prestaciones no llegan a ellos, ¿no? Pues esto es un elemento especialmente importante porque no solamente ocurre con el ingreso mínimo vital, eso ocurre con casi todas las prestaciones que se hacen de todos los ámbitos. Por lo tanto, eso es un elemento especialmente innovador y es una fortuna que hayamos tenido la posibilidad de hacer este tipo de itinerarios con el apoyo de la Comisión Europea y, por supuesto, por iniciativa
Itineraries thanks to the contribution of the European Union and the Spanish government. These evaluation policies are badly needed. Monitoring becomes paramount, but when the social entities become involved in these processes and we are empowered, especially when it comes to providing services, we are not mere passive actors. We would like to be a link between the public and private administrations. Our role is twofold. On the one hand, we need to help and smooth these rendering of services, but on the other hand, we need to really propose another proposal to the different national municipal administrations. So again, I would like to finish by saying that the governance process can improve, increasing cooperation with the third sector. And in Spain we have made great progress. We are talking about processes involving the third sector in the assessment of policies, generation of policies, and how can we ensure things are much better for these individuals, less off, and that we include these topics in the European agenda. Minimum income among households, once again, the interpreter apologizes, the sound comes and goes. We must not forget about food poverty, energy poverty, and pharmaceutical poverty. This is really, at the end of the day, households poverty, and we need to see the situation facing European households, meaning we've got 95 people in situations of poverty, and that has very much to do with care policies, household policies, and additional policies. And once again, they have elements to prove that certain policies have proven to be a roaring success. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Carlos. Maybe
Muchas gracias, Carlos. No sé si algún colega querría hacer algún punto adicional o comentar algo antes de cerrar. Gracias. Leire, si fuera usted tan amable, por favor.
Now, thank you. Yeah, so I think rather than suggesting a single initiative substantively, I think I would
sugerir una iniciativa en concreto. A mí me gustaría abogar por distintas iniciativas cross-funcionales en múltiples áreas.
And I think it's very important that maybe this is an opportunity for the Spanish presidency to focus a bit more on Spain in that respect. But I think it's crucial to identify properly, rigorously,
en primer lugar, hay que ser
rigurosos
sabiendo quiénes son los perdedores de esas grandes macro transformaciones que están teniendo lugar en nuestra era. Y lo digo, por ejemplo, porque en el departamento donde yo trabajo, pero también creo que se hace eco de ello en la Comisión Europea, se está poniendo mucho énfasis en la clase media y cómo está perdiendo su posicionamiento y cómo ello podría acabar lastrando la democracia o el Estado de Derecho. Pero nosotros, cuando lo analizamos de forma rigurosa, no es la clase media, es la clase trabajadora que lleva perdiendo terreno durante las últimas 4 décadas en la mayor parte de los países europeos. Por ende, es importante resaltar quiénes son los grandes perdedores de estas megatendencias o estos macroprocesos que se están produciendo en este momento. Y habría que tener mucho más cuidado y cautela en materia de protección social. La protección social tiene que evitar que aquellos que tienen más acaben enriqueciéndose con estos procesos. No, hay que abogar por la protección social. Es algo que se podría hacer, pero de forma mucho más constructiva. Yo creo que el objetivo es hacer una distribución previa o un impacto, una valoración del impacto. Pero no solo estoy hablando de las políticas sociales, sino en todas las políticas esto sería fundamental. Con una valoración del impacto en todos los grupos o estatus sociales, analizar otro tipo de subgrupos, como por ejemplo tipos familiares, franjas de edad, grupos de género, regiones, y ver cuál es la interacción con su grado de ingresos. Entonces yo por ende abogo por ese objetivo cross-funcional que abarque múltiples áreas. Muchas gracias.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe Dana, can you hear me now?
Muchísimas gracias, Dana. No sé si ahora me escucha, por favor, para hacer algún comentario de cierre. Gracias.
Can you hear me? Or?
Now, yes.
Una vez más, la intérprete se disculpa, pero no recibimos envío de señal a la cabina, por ende no podemos interpretar.
I think we are running out of time.
Nos hemos quedado sin tiempo.
I would like to just conclude by giving a
Me
brief
gustaría
set of remarks about
cerrar con
general
algunas
session.
conclusiones sobre esta última sesión
Thank you
más
first
genérica
of
que
all
hemos
the
realizado. Me
participants
gustaría
in
comenzar
this
dando
panel.
un
Thank you
agradecimiento
to
a los
participants in the
participantes de
previous
este panel,
panel
también
too.
a los otros participantes de los
And,
paneles
as I said,
que
I
nos
think
precedían, y como he
some
dicho
very briefly
anteriormente,
four messages that we can take forward
unas
from the
pinceladas
presentation
o
of the report
conclusiones
today. One,
de la presentación del informe
first is that
que hemos disfrutado
it
en esta
helps us to
sesión.
understand
En
these,
primer lugar, nos ayuda a
megatrends
entender
that our
estas
social protection
megatendencias
systems will have to face
a las que se
in
tendrán que
the
enfrentar los
future
sistemas de
in order
protección
to
social a
assess
futuro,
and
en aras a
evaluate
poder
and
evaluar,
calibrate better the
evaluar y
policies that
mejor
we have
calibrar esas
in the short
políticas
run. I think that's
que
one of
tenemos
the
que
big
promulgar en el corto
contributions
plazo.
of
Creo
this
que
report,
esa es la
of
principal
forcing us to
contribución
think
de este
deep when we
informe,
are
que nos
designing policies,
realmente nos fuerce
for
a
the short run. I think
plantearnos
that's something
en
that
el
came
corto
up in
medio
some of the
plazo cuáles serán las
discussions
consecuencias. Es
very
algo
clearly,
que
and
han
it comes out
resaltado
very
mis
eloquently, of
predecesores
course, in the
de forma muy
report.
elocuente,
The
evidentemente.
second aspect that I would like
El
to
segundo
emphasize
aspecto
is
que
focus
quería
on the life
resaltar
cycle
es el enfoque
and
sobre ese
the role of social protection,
ciclo de vida y el
and
papel
how
de la
interventions
protección
in different
social,
points of
además
its life cycle
de la
have
intervención
consequences and
en
complementarity
distintos
and
puntos del
externalities
ciclo de
across,
vida y cuáles son los
different
impactos de
stages of life, and how that
pues
should
externalidades
help us
exógenas y
redesign
cómo nos
the kind
podría
of
esto
policies
ayudar
that
a
we,
redefinir
put in
el tipo de
place, and more
políticas que estamos
clearly,
intentando
it should force us
promulgar y
to
que
put in the
debería
center of the debate,
obligarnos
of the
a
agenda, this proposal of including
considerar en
social
primera
investments
instancia estas
for a particular category
consideraciones. La inversión en este tipo de políticas de inclusión social debería estar o ser una de nuestras prioridades a futuro. Bueno, debería estar incluida como tal en nuestro presupuesto anual. Y por último, el papel de este tipo de inversiones y cómo tienen un impacto en el largo plazo. Y por último, uno de los mensajes que emana del diálogo que hemos mantenido es el proceso mediante el cual implementemos estos cambios. Es fundamental, favoreciendo la cooperación transfronteriza, arrojando luz sobre el diálogo social, la importancia del mismo, incorporando tanto la visión de los responsables políticos, pero también, evidentemente, los beneficiarios de esas políticas, de modo que sean sostenibles, eficientes en el largo plazo. Y me gustaría cerrar, a pesar de las dificultades que hemos tenido de índole acústica, bueno, me gustaría agradecer al equipo audiovisual de la seguridad social en España y bueno, pues la seguridad social por ser una de las infraestructuras sociales que están llevando a cabo y facilitando la implantación de estas políticas, sin las cuales todos estos debates sobre cómo cambiar las políticas no podrían ser posibles y cómo favorecer a la sociedad en su conjunto en el largo plazo. Con ello me gustaría cerrar esta sesión tan interesante, agradeciendo a Ana Monopoulo por haber presentado este informe y por haberse desplazado hasta España. Muchísimas gracias, Ana.
Continue the discussion about social protection, prepare an aperitif in the room at the front of the entrance. So we'll see you there.